a point of saying we already know how to do this and we're going to put it everywhere. And that is really what Facebook does well.
Maybe the irony 5 years from now is we go on the metaverse using Apple glasses. It sounds like the Apple glasses are actually the perfect design for the metaverse.
It's still a little awkward. You've got a battery pack that's connected with a wire and you got to wear it. I just don't know that people are ready to put stuff on their faces. Google Glass was much less of a obtrusive thing and it still didn't, catch on. I don't know that we're ready to do that. But again, I can't speak for the young generation, obviously. And maybe they are, and maybe this is where they go. And who knows?
Yeah. Well, the history of tech is nobody wants something until the morning they really, really want it, and everybody has to have it. Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Friday, July 9th installment of the Silicon Insider, the only uncensored look at life and business in the Valley. My name is Mike Malone, and I'm here with special contributor Scott Budman, technology reporter for NBC Bay Area. Our producer is Jordan Henderson. Our East Coast correspondent is Bob Grove, and our host, as always, is the Silicon Valley Business Journal. Okay, so we have a few disparate things to talk about this week, but I really want to, focus on Facebook, Meta, because Zuckerberg, he came out with certain things, including an all-hands meeting where he talked about the future of the company and AI. And I was curious what you thought of it. I mean, Facebook's kind of been at the forefront of AI, and now it looks like he's going all in. He's going to implement it in a whole bunch of different ways, including giving you different personalities of AI to deal with, and hosting internal hackathons focused on generative AI, and committed to publishing research and sharing AI technologies with the open source community. Interesting. It seemed like they were ahead of everybody, and then they kind of backed off when the metaverse stalled. Everybody else has jumped into the game now, and Zuckerberg's, saying, no, we're still going to lead this. We're still going to lead the charge, which kind of makes me concerned in itself, given Facebook's history about how it deals with human beings. What do you think of all this? You buying it?
I do. It's something that Facebook has always done well. I mean, remember with the likes on every page and being able to sort of connect to businesses, not just individuals. Facebook has struggled with coming up with some of its own things, but it's always acquired technology well, a la Instagram and WhatsApp. And it's been good at sort of making itself part of whatever you're doing, with the like button and things like that. So Zuckerberg's announcement that he wants to put AI into all of the various Meta apps makes a lot of sense, because there are a lot of great engineers there and people to not only develop the AI, but just as importantly, to get it out to people in a way that we will all be able to use it. I mean, when you're talking about machine learning and large language models, I think you see a lot of people, their eyes glaze over and they think, well, this is either A, going to kill us all, or B, just something I'm not going to worry about. And Zuckerberg is playing a longer game here, and he's thinking this is something we're going to make money on and democratize, which is good. Also, I can't help noticing the timing of this. He's jumping in to a big AI announcement just days after Apple steals all of the Oculus and Metaverse thunder with its own headset and the Vision Pro. And a question I got asked a lot during the week was, hey, what does Zuckerberg think of this? Does this mean that Apple has leapfrogged Meta, or is somehow going to make Oculus, a consumer device? Because that's what Apple does. And so Zuckerberg saying, hey, we're all about AI right now, is almost saying, I don't even want to talk about headsets for a while, even though it's in the news right now.
And yeah, he did bring it up with the employees a little bit. He said, yeah, the Apple headset is interesting, but it's not something we haven't already looked at, a technology and all that. And besides, it's $3,500, and we have this new, Quest 3 coming out at $499. So we'll reach a wider user base. It reminds me of the early days of personal computers. Whenever there was a breakthrough, the competition would come out the next day and say, we have a better one, and it's going to be a whole lot cheaper.
Right.
So
And
I'm curious, is this a pivot or is this a head fake?
I don't know. I mean, say what you will about the Facebook models, the Oculus and things like that. They were priced as consumer devices, but they haven't taken off. They just haven't. I mean, they haven't become a big thing that you give your kids on Christmas, or they haven't become something that young people get together and use. They just haven't become anything near, a tablet or a cell phone or whatever. That just hasn't happened yet. And then you look at Apple, which traditionally does make that happen. And they come out with something not available till next year, and it's going to start at $3,500. Whoa. So it's going to take a while for these things to get into the consumer sphere, if they ever do. And again, Apple normally does it. They have a very attractive platform for this Vision Pro if people are going to want it, but that's a high price to step into something and give it a try.
Yeah, but this is kind of like old Apple. I mean, first gen Steve Jobs, which was you introduce products expensive. They're designed for filmmakers and they're designed for advertising agencies and design shops and for heavy duty corporate R&D applications. Then you start bringing the price down, but you make your foray into the business that way. And this time, Apple, now we've gotten so used to Apple doing consumer products that when they actually introduce an old-fashioned kind of breakthrough product, we're shocked. $3,500. I remember when the 10 meg profile disc for the Apple III was $5,000. So, and that was like 10,000 in 1980s money. So this is kind of the Apple HP kind of way of doing it this time around, it seems.
Well, you bring up an interesting point, because during those days where Apple had 3-4% of the market, until they really started to crash and burn and struggle before they brought Jobs back, they were a hot company. And they were, as I sort of recall, proud to have like 4% of the market, but it was the elite, more expensive 4%. And maybe that's what they're thinking with the sort of headset market is, we know this is going to be a small percentage that is going to sort of adapt this in the early stages. And then you're right, the prices would drop. But Vision Pro, you're right, may be a 3 or 4% kind of thing. I certainly wouldn't consider myself in that 3 or 4%. That's a really high price to pay for something. But as people adopt that technology, maybe both the technology and the future products get cheaper.
Well, maybe Apple wants to show its chops as innovators again. I mean, there's been a lot of complaints over the last decade, ever since Jobs passed away, that Apple is a great builder, it's a great upgrader, but it hasn't done anything innovative in that time. And now all of a sudden, here we go. They're taking the high end of this new industry.
I had a chance after the event out at Apple headquarters to talk to some of the executives, and even got this close to Tim Cook, and none of them were taking the bait on the question I wanted to know, which was, how important is this to Tim Cook in terms of a legacy product that he came up with as CEO 100%? Some people say the watch was already in development when Jobs was still with us. So this felt like a really big moment for Tim Cook, but no one would take the bait. But it really does. And I wonder if, like you say, that sort of early adopter, high price, gee whiz thing that eventually, and again, Apple has shown it can do this, becomes part of the landscape at a lower price eventually.
Now let's get back to Meta for a moment. I said a head fake or a pivot. Is this Zuckerberg, this obviously it has something to do with the Apple Worldwide Developers Conference and the announcement and all that, but is this Zuckerberg saying, oh, that giant project that was going to change the world and cost the company $1 billion and ended up, we had to lay off tens of thousands of employees. Never mind. Pay your attention to this over here, that we're now the big AI player. This is our real future, not the metaverse.
It's a good question because, yeah, you're right. There were a lot of layoffs, and we just haven't heard much about the metaverse in quite a while. It felt toxic to Facebook, to Meta, and I wonder if it's one of those things that, you and I talked last week about Google's plans for San Jose. Eventually, it may take 30 years, but we're getting there. Yeah, maybe the metaverse will be a thing, but it's certainly not full steam ahead. I think you're right in that Mark Zuckerberg, instead of trying to lead the way to the next thing, and Facebook hasn't always been good at that, is jumping on the current thing and saying, hey, we're making a point of saying we already know how to do this and we're going to put it everywhere. And that is really what Facebook does well.
Maybe the irony 5 years from now is we go on the metaverse using Apple glasses. I mean, it sounds like the Apple glasses are actually the perfect design for the metaverse.
It's still a little awkward. You've got a battery pack that's connected with a wire and you got to wear it. I just don't know that people are ready to put stuff on their faces. Google Glass was much less of a obtrusive thing, and it still didn't, catch on. I don't know that we're ready to do that. But again, I can't speak for the young generation, obviously. And maybe they are, and maybe this is where they go. And who knows?
Yeah. Well, the history of tech is nobody wants something until the morning they really, really want it, and everybody has to have it.
Absolutely.
Okay. Back to Apple. Strikers. Not often you see people forming a picket line. I think it's probably the first one at the Apple mothership, right? It's the Writers Guild of America. Obviously, they're striking down in Hollywood, and they actually got assistance from the Teamsters, the California Nurses Association, and Alphabet Workers Union. So a big solidarity party striking for the Writers Guild. This is the kind of backlash I expect when they said, oh, let's go into television, let's do our own production. It probably never crossed their minds that they would have pickets outside their company.
True. But look, Apple is as much in with this game because of its streaming success as Amazon, as Hulu, as Peacock, as HBO. There are many others that, Netflix even. I mean, this is a huge thing now. And I've been trying to read up on this as much as possible. And one of the interesting issues is, the writers say they're being treated more like gig workers now because of caution. These streamers are saying, okay, we'll put 8 episodes out there of a show to see if it works and if it gets picked up for more and more. The writers used to have, steady work for a long time.
One veteran writer said, who's making TV series right now and all that, he said, my pay is back down to where it was when I was a 22-year-old kid starting out.
Right. And I think what has impressed me is the wealthy actors and actresses and directors and people who have come out and even hit the picket line and saying, look, my success is because of these writers. And I think that's a really important move because these are many of the faces and names you already know. These writers are
exploding from across the country.
Right. Obviously, the writers are the behind the scenes, important foundation of these shows, but the people who are the faces and the names are coming out in support. And I think that's important. And I didn't know, I had a lot of ignorance. I didn't know how this stuff worked in the streaming world. Was it the same as TV? Is it the same as the movies? And to find that so much of this stuff is interconnected has been really interesting. And I'm impressed that so many of what we would call the frontline stars of these shows have come out in support and brought food and carried the signs for these writers. I find myself checking every day just to see how this is all going. It's fascinating.
Well, and it can't be a good PR look because Apple had $400 billion in revenue last year, and the strikers are asking for a $17 million deal, which is just chump change. And Apple likes to have the image of being a good progressive company, and they kind of hid the China stuff because that made them look bad. But this is on TV. This is right there out front, and people have got to be reacting to it. And yet Apple is being absolutely tight-lipped on this. They're not saying a word.
It seems everybody is. I'm surprised this strike has lasted this long because it feels so basic that for all of these shows, and name any of them that you enjoy, they all start, with good writing. And we are privileged, not only in the movies, but in these streaming shows, to have, what many people are considering the golden age of entertainment. And really that all comes from great writing. And that's what I see, with shows like Succession that get just monster attention on Twitter, even more so than I think actual viewers, but they just get monster attention. And people constantly cite not just, hey, this actor or actress is great, but they cite the writing. And I think these big companies and studios and companies like Apple, I hope they understand that that's what's really being noticed, and that there's not going to be as successful a streaming future without these men and women.
Well, historically over the history of Hollywood, the writer is the last in the on the totem pole and easily replaceable. Let's see if that's still true in our streaming age.
I agree. I think, something's got to be done.
We talked about Ford was going to start using Tesla's EV network. And we said, well, is that enough to create the standard for the industry? Well, now GM has. They've just announced it, and they're going to use the same charging port as Tesla does and all of that. So now we got the two biggest automobile companies in the United States and two of the biggest in the world. I think that's now the standard. I think you're going to take your F-150 Lightning and plug it in. I think you're going to take your Bolt and plug it in at a Tesla station.
Yeah, this is a great, great move for the EV future, I think. Tesla, and credit Musk for this, got way out in front, not only with the electric cars, although he wasn't the first to make electric cars, but with the charging network.
Yeah, the infrastructure.
Right. The infrastructure is out there. And while you've seen other companies like ChargePoint and other, the EVgo's of the world out there, and that's great. I mean, we here in the Bay Area are spoiled rotten with chargers everywhere we go. It's wonderful. But to have that network, especially the supercharging network, is just so important. And it really is a difference maker. And Musk could have said, no, we're keeping that for ourselves. And I think that still would have been the number one reason to buy a Tesla. But the idea of opening it up to other companies, I think is just an overall, it's a great move for the EV future, and B, a really nice revenue generator for Tesla. And you saw the stock price as soon as that, Mary Barra and Musk announced the joint thing with the charger. You saw both of those stock prices go up. This is something that I think investors are understandably excited about for many reasons. And I think it's a great move.
So this has been a pretty good, after several weeks of taking a lot of heavy shots, this has been an interesting week for Elon. You might say a very successful week, not just with this announcement, but the premiere of Tucker on Twitter drew an audience like in the first 30 minutes larger than most networks have. Are we going to see a land rush now of media figures going on their own and heading over to Twitter?
I wouldn't be surprised if people want to do that. My concern, and this is what keeps me from saying it was a great week for Musk, is he insists on courting the far right, bafflingly. I mean, maybe not bafflingly. Maybe we've got to just say, hey, Elon's red-pilled. He's going to come out with anti-Semitic stuff, and he's going to tick off the LGBT community because that's how he feels, and deal with it either by fleeing or deal with it by somehow accepting it. It is a bizarre way for someone to act, especially when they're trying to attract advertisers.
Don't you think Don Lemon is privately talking to him, and Chris Cuomo and all these people that have been, shed from the cable news networks and from, the main networks?
Maybe, and I would like to think that Twitter is a home for all sides. So, yeah, why not? The audience is there. It's a very news savvy audience, and maybe that's the kind of thing that brings in advertising. But I'm telling you, if you're an advertiser, the last thing you want to do is be anywhere near a tweet that Elon Musk is ramping up because he just wants to stir up these terrible feelings apparently among users. It's amazing.
And yet he's so quixotic. I mean, he's come out for Robert Kennedy Jr., who is a far right character. You might say he's a crank character, but he's all over the map politically. I mean, it's very unusual to see a person in the position Elon's in to be behaving like this.
Right. I mean, it's Pride Month. We've seen how brands embrace the LGBT community. But if you're near an Elon Musk, tweet or someone that's anti-trans, I mean, it's just a bad look. And that's going to be a huge challenge for Twitter, I think, is revenue, because the guy who owns the company seems to be scaring advertisers away purposely. I have no other way to say that. I just never see that in a network.
A lot of corporations are kind of scaring away people too. I grew up in a world where corporations really didn't take strong political stances on cultural matters. They did on political matters. You were almost uniformly Republican, and the unions were uniformly Democrat. But now companies are getting pretty deep into controversial social issues, and it's kind of a shift that we didn't see even 15 years ago, but it's here apparently to stay.
I think so, because I think companies want to reach out to a broader audience than what they used to do. And so, call it social politics, I'll call it inclusivity. And, I think you just want to reach out to a broader audience. I mean, why not?
Why not? Maybe you lose $400 million or $1 billion, whatever it was that Anheuser-Busch lost by losing its core market. I mean, it seems to me you should try to at least hang on to your existing customers if you're going to try to reach out to other markets.
Well, branding is branding. And I wonder you have to do it thoughtfully. I'll give you that. And you have to do it accurately. And you don't want to tick off your core audience no matter what, political side you're on. But I don't think we're going to see much less of that. I think we're going to see more outreach as companies want to just broaden the tent of whatever it is they're doing or selling.
Yeah, well, those audiences are growing larger. Yeah. So there's a deep-seated business reason to do it too. Okay. We've been talking about our current bear market and inflation and the threat of recession now for a couple of years. This week, it looked like Wall Street has begun a major turn into a bull market. I mean, I'm seeing multiple commentators saying the same thing, that we came off of a 20% decline in the S&P 500, but starting in recent weeks, the market's coming back and it's looking good. Now, does that mean the recession threat is gone? Does that mean that this monetary management that the Fed's been doing is working? It's hard to figure out because the bear market wasn't as bad as we thought. It lasted just a year, 20% drop. Is this going to be a mild bull market, or are we about to take off into a next great boom?
It's hard to tell. I mean, especially covering tech, which is around here a big chunk of the market, but for the country, kind of a smaller sliver. The tech earnings have come in strong. The layoffs have actually propelled investors to have more confidence about the profit margins of these companies. And that sent stock prices up of a lot of companies, including the Metas that we talked about. And overall, we've learned that even during inflationary times, people are still spending. And that is always encouraging when it comes to, the strength of our market, whether or not you buy stocks. But also these interest rate hikes have hit where it hurts. I mean, credit card debt is still costing a lot more than it used to. Mortgage rates are still higher.
Confidence is still right.
Well, because I think if you're carrying any debt, you're feeling it much more than you did. And that includes car loans and some student loans, not to mention credit card loans. Mortgage rates, I mean, goodness, it's not as if Bay Area housing here, where you and I sit, are, the prices are already high, and now you've got 7% mortgages instead of 3%. And that happened in a very quick period of time. And it really all but paralyzed our housing market. And so the things that traditionally move to keep things flowing, some of them aren't moving as much. And so that's concerning going forward. But economists always tell you, look at the consumer. And the consumer has still been shopping. And that's really quite impressive, I must say.
You and I always use two indices around here. Our companies hiring and also our new startups getting venture money and our housing prices going up. And are they selling in a short amount of time? On the first one, they're not hiring yet. And the VCs are slowly getting back into the game. Interestingly and pleasantly, they seem to be going in at the top end. It's at Series A and even at the angel level, the startup money, instead of going for the giant ones on the bottom, which doesn't really help entrepreneurship around here. So that's a good sign. Housing, I've noticed lately, the prices are starting to creep up a little bit. And some of the houses in my neighborhood in Sunnyvale are selling pretty quickly. I don't know. Maybe it's just because it's June and people are moving away and other people are moving into the valley. But that seems pretty optimistic, much more than 6 months ago.
Yeah, I mean, for housing, I would just say it's moving quickly because there's so little inventory. And that's what you really want to see is a whole lot of housing out there to be looked at and picked over. Now, something comes out and we're back to multiple offers and people jumping in because there's so little inventory. As far as,
probably get a condo pretty cheap next to the Google vacant lot in downtown San Jose. All that construction, those houses are going to be fire saled.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's, I don't know what's going to happen there. But, you talk about startups, and one thing the Valley has traditionally done well, even in hard times, is have something that gets hot.
Yeah.
Whether it was social media after the dot-com boom, gaming, then you got into, chips, and then you got into, obviously phones and hardware. And now there's AI, and AI seems to be lifting all boats, or most boats, except maybe Intel, but it's lifting boats. Right. It's lifting the chip sector like it hasn't been lifted in a long time. It's lifting software, and it's helping companies that are savvy about these things like Meta that we talked about to say, hey, we're going to put this on all of our things. Google is putting it into search, which is huge. And that's where a lot of the VC money understandably is going. But once AI becomes commoditized, like, hey, we expect it in everything, then it will be interesting to see where the VC money goes, because who is going to use it best, and who is going to then jump out of just, hey, we've got AI, and move into something that they're using it for. And I think we're not too far away from seeing.
We're inching towards it, and that should be very, very interesting.
Yeah, generation of companies, whether hardware or software, that has AI built in and then moves forward in some other direction.
Yeah, and I think it's going to be the creation of entertainment using AI combined with medical. People are already using AI doctors, and it's going to, surgery and everything else. So I think, I'm feeling pretty good these days about the future. Usually I feel really good after everybody has written off this town, and they've been writing it off since late last year. And now when everybody's leaving and they're saying, dismissing the Valley and the Valley's dead, this is the time probably to get in. So, okay, well, that's it for the week. All you people at home who watched us or listened to our live podcast last week in front of the audience at the San Jose Downtown Rotary, if you liked it, drop us a note. And if there's enough interest, we'll do something like that again. It was a lot of fun for us. That's it for now, folks. You can find us on Silicon Valley Business Journal homepage, as well as on Spotify. I should memorize this. Anchor, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, LinkedIn, and check out our YouTube page. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.